Good advice. All right. I also hear that Jack Fitzmyer, pardon me, has a special update for us on the. Hang on while I admit someone on the gala banquet that's coming up in April. Jack, what could you
Yeah,
tell
we
us?
had hoped this evening to begin selling tickets to the gala. A committee of 5 folks led by John Rummel has been working on the banquet. It's going to be held April 5th at the Promega campus in Fitchburg, where the old observatory is, old home of MAS. Tickets will go on sale via email tonight. I think John is planning on sending out an email with a form at about 8 this evening. We encourage everybody to come. It's a beautiful venue. We've got a great program worked up. It's $35 a ticket. You must be a member of MAS and you may bring a guest. Um, it's first come, first serve, and we already have, I think, Jurgen, it's right, about 44 people. We've pulled the board and the committee and a bunch of veteran members, some from the 50s and 60s, and a dozen or so of them have already agreed to come and join us. So it's going to be a great evening, I think. But watch your emails for uh, an invitation. You'll need to fill out a form and send it to our MAS address. Jurgen is watching that. You send it the completed form with a check um, uh, for yourself and a plus one, a guest if you'd like. But I think it's going to be a lovely event and we're looking forward to it. So thanks to everyone who's been working on that.
I might jump in here real quick to say that in an organization like this, sometimes there's a lot of members who may be new or maybe feel like they're not really part of the core. Maybe they come to a meeting now and then, watch one now and then, but don't really feel like, oh, maybe the banquet's not for me. Absolutely come to the banquet. It's a lot of fun. It's where you really get to meet and interact with a lot of people you might not otherwise, and really kind of get to the core of what the group is. I highly recommend coming to the banquet, even if you're not naturally inclined to, even if you're not one of these people in the group who knows each other by first name.
It's a great point, Dan. We have room for about, we think, about 100 guests, and we're up to about 45 or so who've already registered. So if you'd like to participate, get your reservation form in as soon as you can. Thanks,
And
Lauren.
as far as I know, a special prize that you get when you get there is a name tag. So you can find out who these people you've always seen but are too embarrassed to ask their names are.
You'll get a name tag. You're going to get a raffle tickets. You're going to have a nice evening. You're going to meet Bill Linton, who is the CEO of Promega, who's going to join us, and we'll make a greeting. So it's going to be a pretty cool evening, I think.
And I believe drinks are free. Is that correct?
Beer and wine will be served. Yes,
It's all
indeed.
you
It's
need to
all
know.
included. It's a catered meal. High Point Steakhouse out towards Barneveld is who's catering for us. And this USONA, it's at the USONA building in Promega, at Promega, which is a gorgeous new facility. It's going to be lovely. So I think, and actually, as a matter of fact, the MC is with us tonight, and that's Bonnie, who's going to carry on for us. It's going to be great. Thanks.
And yeah, and also there'll be optional tours of the what used to be
Yes.
back in the day the student observatory that used to be next to Washburn, and then Oscar Mayer when they were going to demolish the place, demolish that student observatory. They Oscar Mayer of the you know what Oscar Mayer stands for, was a fan of astronomy, was amateur astronomy aficionado himself, and he was like, "Oh, we need to have this building so that the Madison Astronomical Society can use it as an observatory." And he put up the money to move that observatory from the UW campus to its current location in Fitchburg. And then just a couple of years ago, it was renamed in honor of the woman astronomer who made the first observations of pulsars now I'm spacing out.
Jocelyn Bell Burnell.
Thank you. Jocelyn Bell Burnell is named out in honor of her. So,
And it is still being used for research by a UW graduate student who is going to lead the tours of the building. It's not, I will say, it's not an easily accessible building. It's not, we would say today, it's not handicap accessible. But it is within, I would say, 200 yards of the USONA Institute where we'll be meeting. And if I am right, Bonnie or Rob is on the committee as well, and Rita, we start at 4 o'clock. You'll be asked on the form if you'd like to have a tour of the observatory, and then our festivities begin at 5.
all right. Very
Thanks,
good.
Lawrence.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Jack. It sounds like a great time. Don't miss it. We have a few minutes to kill. If there's anyone here who's not ever attended a Madison Astronomical Society meeting before and they'd like to introduce themselves, feel free to unmute yourself and let us know who you are. If not, you don't have to if you don't want to. But we'll go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
I'm Avid Sukaja. I am interested in astronomy, so I was wondering what I should do and stuff, just trying to get some exposure to it. Have some like-minded people around me and stuff. So.
Well, you found the right group. Welcome.
And normally we meet at UW Space Place where people will chat at the meetings about the things that they're working on and the new kinds of equipment or questions about the equipment that and the hobby that they have. But also we have our observing site, dark sky observing site in Greene County, Yana Research Station. And when we have our star parties out there, you could go out there and see a group of people using all sorts of different kind of equipment. And they're more than happy to give you a tour of all the different options that there are and let you look through every kind of option that's at the star party that night. So yeah, if you're new to the hobby, this is a great place to be.
And we have before our meetings at 6:45, we have a newcomers meeting off to the side and happy to answer your questions and get you acquainted. And it's a good group of people. So hope to see you there.
When is that again? Sorry.
Half hour at 6:45. The regular meeting starts at 7:15 and this starts a half hour before. And then we have a half hour to answer questions and whatever.
And the meetings themselves are at UW Space Place on the second Friday of every month.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, all right. Very good. I'm just going to bring up some notes. It's time to introduce our guest speaker for the night. Tonight we are having a presentation titled My Solar Astronomy Journey, presented by our good friend Brian Champion. And he presented for us before. If you were with us, you were lucky enough to see how he built his own observatory in his backyard. Just to say a little bit about Brian. Brian Champion is a distinguished and very experienced solar imaging expert. And if you're lucky enough to be a member of our Facebook group, he frequently puts up pictures of his solar images, and they're amazing, very high detailed, very fascinating. He visits us tonight from Prairie du Chien, where he's been capturing stunning solar phenomena since 2017 in his backyard observatory. He can tell you a little bit about his equipment, but it's good stuff. And he has also some of his photographs of the sun have also been shared within the astronomy community, being featured in the Amateur Astronomy Magazine. And also over the years, he's also spent a lot of time out at Wyalusing State Park, sharing his expertise and passion for solar observation with audiences of all ages. And if you've ever seen, they have a very nice observatory facility there at Wyalusing State Park that he can tell you about. He's a very friendly, knowledgeable person. So yeah, don't hesitate to ask him some questions. Um, and I'm just trying to think if there's anything else uh, I'd want to say. But yeah, it's great to have him back again as a guest presenter tonight. Everyone, please allow me to present Brian Champion. And yeah, Brian, if you want to go over to screen share and take over the meeting, go ahead.
All right, sounds good. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Shame we couldn't meet in person, but I guess the weather had other plans for us tonight. Gonna apologize up front for my dogs. You may hear some dogs barking in the background. They apparently want to join in. So, so anyways, a little bit about me. Why are we not sharing? Here we go. So as Lawrence had mentioned, I've been an astronomer since 1999. I've been here in the Driftless zone quite a few years now. I've been doing a lot of high resolution solar imaging lately. I'm going to go through like how I create those images, what all goes into them, some of the different equipment I use. I've had a couple images published in Amateur Astronomy Magazine. I've been to the last 3 eclipses plus 1 partial. I do some solar outreach out here at Wyalusing as well. I've done like 4 public events now, which is it's interesting to watch people react when they look through a solar telescope. It's a different experience to be able to look at the sun through a telescope. People seem to really enjoy it. So I'll be doing that again this summer, probably 3 or 4 times this summer up at Wyalusing, maybe some other places if I can get some interest in it. So if you're in the area and want to take a look at the sun, please stop out. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the different layers of the sun, and primarily what I can see with the equipment I have. So the photosphere is what we can see with like a white light filter. So think of like Bader film or something like that on the front of your telescope. Allows you to see sunspots and some like granulation detail. That's about all you can see with a white light filter like that. I also use solar hydrogen alpha filters, which allows me to see the chromosphere, which is where all the detail is really at. And you'll see as we go through what the different things look like. There's also the corona. This we can only see during a total eclipse. Like I said, I've been lucky enough to see 2 total eclipses so far. I'm hoping I'll be around for the next one. I've also gotten to see an annular eclipse, which is quite a bit different. And I'll show some images of those as well. If there's any questions as we go along, please go ahead and ask as we go along. So here's a couple different wavelengths. Here's the hydrogen alpha wavelength and the detail that it shows versus the white light or the broadband filter. So you can see there's quite a level of detail difference. Both are interesting in my opinion. The white light filter, you can see quite a bit of the detail around sunspots, which is always interesting. Whereas the hydrogen alpha filter shows different types of detail around sunspots, but also shows a lot more other surface detail. I'll go through some of the different terminology. So these are typical things that I see while observing. Prominences, some people call them flares. It's actually a prominence. Sticks out from the limb of the sun, the outer edge. Active regions are typically where solar flares will occur from. And let's see here. So like in this particular area here where it's white, this would be an active flare going off from an active region like this. Filaments here are, so if you think about like this prominence, that's like a profile look at this. Filaments are like a straight on, like an edge down view of it. So these filaments are basically the same thing as a prominence is. Prominence is just a side profile of this. Here's one of my solar telescopes. I'll kind of go through some of the anatomy a little bit about it. So this particular telescope is a Lunt, and it uses, so they use what are called etalons, which is like the primary filter for basically filtering out the hydrogen alpha wavelength. And then inside of this unit here, which is the focuser, inside of there is a blocking filter, which actually blocks out ultraviolet and infrared light. This is what makes it safe to look through the telescope. The secondary etalon on this is to refine the wavelength a little bit more than the primary etalon can. It dims the view a little bit, but it really increases the detail significantly. And this is my imaging setup. So on this one, I have a 4x Barlow behind it. And when I show some of the other images, you'll see why I do that. But it magnifies the view considerably. This is a different type of telescope. This one uses what are called tilt tune etalons. Similar type of etalon, but instead of like where the Lunt uses air pressure to tune the etalon, this you actually tilt it at a small angle. And this one, again, has two etalons on it to refine the wavelength down as much as possible. This one has a little bit different style blocking filter, but does the same thing. It blocks out infrared and UV light to make it safe to look through. This was a setup I created for my Celestron C8 to try to get as much detail as I could. Here's another telescope I'd set up. This one is used for like, so I can shoot like a full disc image in a single frame and not have to create a mosaic from it. I've used this one at a couple of different eclipses now. It's a very handy setup, takes great images. I'd done kind of a breakdown of it for if anybody wanted to build something similar to it. This was my first solar telescope. So when I went to the eclipse in 2017, I was at a place in Wyoming, and I got the opportunity to look through a solar telescope. There was two guys from Japan I met there that had 9 scopes set up, and I was lucky enough to get to look through one, which is what's taken me down the rabbit hole I'm currently in with solar imaging. I was captivated by what I could see, and really that's what piqued my interest in this. Here's some of the different telescopes I've used over the years. So here's a telescope with my cork on it, the original telescope, and a 40mm Coronado. Nice little scope for looking through. Not so great for imaging, but it's nice to look through. This is a 150mm scope that I have with the cork on the back of it. Pretty decent detail with this. Really gathers a lot of light. Inside of here by the diagonal, there's a filter that blocks out more UV and IR light, just because of the size of this telescope. Here's a small telescope I'd set up to try to do single shot full disk images. It worked okay, but just not quite the level of detail I wanted. I always like to show these stickers on telescopes. For what I do, they kind of make me laugh a little bit, right? Because it's the very first thing I do with the telescope is point it at the sun. Here's some different adapters I made for my Coronado etalons to fit onto a regular telescope. These are some shots from inside my observatory. The telescope set up looking at the sun. Currently I can set up 2 telescopes in my observatory. And a lot of times what I'll do, if sky condition permits, I'll have one set up doing hydrogen alpha and the other one set up doing white light. Here's some more telescope setups. When I spoke about a white light filter, this is the type of filter I'm talking about. Looks like a reflective film filter. This little setup here, the Skywatcher Heliofine, was an awesome thing to have for the last eclipse. Tracked the sun beautifully. I didn't really have to do much with it. It's a really handy setup for a small solar telescope. I mean, it's basically you set it up, you point it east of the sun. It figures out its location, figures out sun elevation. It'll find the sun and then just track it for you. Very handy setup. I've also come up with a way to do some solar guiding. I ran across an article a couple years ago about PhD2 guiding, and there was a planetary modification for it. So I thought about it a little bit, and I thought, with the right guide scope, the sun would essentially look kind of like a big planet. So I downloaded the mod for this, and sure enough, it tracks beautifully. This is what I use for shooting time-lapse videos, which I'll show a few of. But this type of guiding like this, it's precision guiding, so I can stay on like a prominence or an active region for several hours and record images for time-lapse video. So here's one of the time lapses I did last year. This phenomenon it's called coronal rain. If you look at it, kind of looks like rain coming down. It's just very fine structure. Here was kind of a large prominence out along the edge and a filament there on the surface, moving at fairly high rate for filaments. I generally don't see filaments move that quickly. Here was another large prominence out here, kind of an active region here. So typically when I see these light up real bright like this, it means this is coming directly at us. That's generally what that looks like when one of these goes off coming at us. So these are some of the first images I took through my cork. I was really excited when I was able to capture prominences like this and a little bit of surface detail. My processing skill wasn't very good for this at the time, but I learned quite a bit over the years how to bring out more detail yet. These are some of the current images I've shot by comparison. So the last couple of years have been just phenomenal for solar imaging. We reached solar maximum at some point late last year. So there's been a lot of surface activity, a lot of prominence activity. It's been a great time to be a solar imager. This one image here in particular, these two images were shot within minutes of each other. This purple one here was actually shot in ultraviolet. I've got an ultraviolet filter, and I was really surprised that I was able to capture prominence detail with ultraviolet over hydrogen alpha. So this is, so I'll go over like how I process these images. So this is kind of what this looks like when I shoot a mosaic. That's like the approximate field of view I get with that Lunt telescope with the 4x barrel on it. So I shoot typically, like in this here, there's 24 images there. Usually I shoot a few extra ones of like right around like if there's like a specific area of interest like this, I'll shoot images just around this as well, and then throw them into the mix. But this is like the typical pattern I shoot. And I do this manually. I just use a hand controller on my telescope, and I just I'll shoot one frame. Typically, I shoot 2,000 images at a time, at about 100 frames a second. So it takes about 20 seconds. Then I'll move this telescope down, providing a fair amount of overlap. I'll shoot another 2,000, so on and so forth. So I initially process images in AutoStacker. This will sort through all the images. You can look at the quality graph here. These images were from about 2 weeks ago. So seeing conditions have not been great. We've had some blue sky days, but the seeing conditions have just not been very good at all. But you can see, some of the images are pretty good, some are pretty bad. So AutoStacker will sort all those out, and I typically stack the best 10% and 25%. I found that seems to work pretty good for me and my setup. So once I get all the images, then I move it over to PT GUI Pro, which then stitches all the images into a mosaic. So this is what a pre-processed mosaic looks like. You can see there's a pretty heavy gradient on this. We're pretty dark on this one side, pretty bright on this side. So I'll show how I eliminate that in Photoshop. So in Photoshop, I use the linear gradient tool in Camera Raw. I basically just drag a gradient across this, and then I will use the exposure settings to try to get pretty even exposure, get a nice flat image. It makes my processing a lot easier to do that. So then once I do that, I actually select the dark area first, because in order to bring out the prominence detail without blowing out the surface detail, I need to process the dark area differently than the surface part. So if you're familiar with astrophotography at all, basically what I'm doing is stretching this background. I move the white slider over to where the data starts, and then stretch it as much as I can to try to bring out like the real faint prominence details. Once I have that, I will colorize the background. I try to, after the last eclipse, I actually got to see what the actual color of a prominence was. So I try to get closer to that now than I had been in the past. So I use this kind of darker red color. And you see in the histograms here how I adjust that to get this red color from the black and white. And then what I'll do is I'll do a paste in place, and I'll paste a copy of the surface image onto this. And then I'll go through and I'll darken up the details on the surface image. So I use the dehaze and clarity mainly to darken up the details, and I'll add a little bit of texture to it to help improve the detail level. Then I'll use the Smart Sharpen to enhance those details even more. You have to be kind of careful with smart sharpen. It's easy to over sharpen, and then it really doesn't look very good at all. So then I go back to camera raw on this, and I'll use a radial gradient to darken up the limb area, so it has a spherical look to it. Otherwise, the sun just looks flat, which is if you see it through a telescope, you can see the radial part of it. So I try to emulate that as much as I can. So I'll darken up the outer edge here a little bit, just to provide that spherical look to it. Once I have that, then what I have then is two different layers here, one that has the surface and one that has the background. And the final step then is to flatten those two together and then rotate it to its correct orientation. So these are some of the images I've shot over the years, starting in 18. It's kind of a show of how the sun has changed in the years leading up to solar maximum, and also my processing techniques and skills, as well as the difference in the level of equipment I've been using. So the first ones here were shot with the Quark, all the way up to 23, when I started using the Coronado. I started using Coronado in 22. Then I got the Lunt at the end of last year. So there, significant differences in equipment as well. But you can see just from, single sunspots, hardly any surface activity versus what we had toward the end of last year. So quite a difference. These are some things I've caught passing by while I'm imaging. First, a jet, and these are actually pelicans. Got a pair of pelicans flying by. This was a bird flyby I caught last year. Just kind of caught it out of the corner of my eye as I was imaging. Kind of interesting when things fly by when you're imaging. So these are my eclipse photos now. This was the one I shot in 2017. It was a little place called Orne, Wyoming, almost dead center between Casper and Douglas. Kind of out in the middle of nowhere. It was a wayside, a single bathroom wayside with about 2,000 people. So we all got to know each other. Here's some images I shot of the area and during the eclipse. This was the camera setup I was using. I had my Nikon D700 camera, 800 millimeter manual focus lens, and at the time I couldn't get any other type of front mount filter other than a square. It was a 4-inch square filter, so I made an adapter to be able to put that filter on the front of my telescope. There was a partial eclipse I caught just outside of Prairie du Chien. Didn't last very long. It was, like I said, right at sunrise. Pretty interesting. That was the first partial one I'd caught. This was the annular eclipse. It was in Canyonlands, Utah for this. I was, as you can tell by how centered the moon is in the full disk, I was a little off of the center of totality. But I still got pretty good images. So for me, this lasted about 25 seconds before it come through the edge again. Other places had 35, 40 seconds, depending on where you were at. I shot this with one of my hydrogen alpha filters. So you can see some sunspot detail and surface detail and a nice prominence here. Here's what the area looked like. Like I said, I had 2 telescopes going. And a few people stopped by, take a look through telescopes. So this was the most recent eclipse, April 8th of 2024. This particular image is made up of 9 other exposures to be able to get the fine corona detail like that. Eclipse exposure is kind of it's a real hard thing to figure out, because it's still fairly bright, but yet you want to be able to get this fine detail in the end. So you got to basically, you have to really overexpose to get the fine detail, all the way down to almost underexposing to capture the detail close to the limb. And then I had to blend them all together using an HDR technique. So I was able to catch the diamond ring effect. This was as the eclipse was ending. And here was the one prominence you could see naked eye. It was kind of almost surreal for me. I see prominences all the time through my solar telescopes. I guess I never imagined being able to see one naked eye until this eclipse, and then you could actually see that naked eye. So that was pretty exciting, for me anyways, as it relates to solar imaging. Then I was able to see more like what the true color is. Here was, again, I had 2 cameras set up. There's a few people around. In the morning while I was setting up, several people looked through the 2 different scopes I had set up. So that was kind of cool. People got to take a look at the sun, something they would never normally be able to see. And that's what I've got. So does anybody have any questions?
Hey, can you go back just like one screen? So there with that one. So what is like the big black? So like the bottom row, the picture way to the left. And I guess it's even on the right. So what is that?
The laptop hood here.
Oh, is that all that is? Just a laptop hood?
Yep.
Okay.
I just used it's kind of just a basic laptop stand with a laptop hood over it.
Okay. And then did you have the laptop then hooked up to one of those so you could see it?
Yep. I had the laptop hooked up to this particular setup here.
Oh, cool.
Yep. So this one I was recording hydrogen alpha, which is this image. And this one I was recording white light, which is this.
Brian, this is Jack. Thanks for your presentation. It's wonderful to see all this. Is it possible, I mean, you mentioned it, but is it at all possible to do imaging through a Coronado PST?
Yes. I don't have one personally to try, but I've seen several images from guys that use Coronado PST. It's actually, let me see if I can get back. So the 40 millimeter one I had mentioned toward the beginning, some of my different equipment, that was the precursor to the PST. So it's almost exact same size. And I know I can image through that scope. So I think choosing the right camera would probably be pretty critical for that. I think the PST is also 40 millimeter focal length.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, you wouldn't want to go like overboard on camera, like too big of a sensor, right? Because then you'll just get like a really small image of it. So yeah, this one here. So this was like the precursor to the PSTs. And like I said, I've imaged through this one before, and it works fine. So I wouldn't see any reason why you couldn't image through one.
What kind of camera and other Barlow or anything?
So I've used up to a 2x Barlow on this. A 2x is like really pushing the limit of what the scope can resolve.
So so I guess it sounds like this is more of an entry level scope, shorter focal length on it.
Yeah. Yep.
And I imagine, the smallest sensor size that you can get, the better, I would think.
And it's, so one thing to really keep in mind is you definitely want to use a monochrome camera for it. With a hydrogen alpha filter like this, the only thing you're going to get is red light. If you use a color camera on it, you're basically throwing away more than half of your resolution, because you're only getting the one red channel. There will be no information in green or blue channels.
Thank you.
And that camera will probably come in handy for other applications too. Like if you need a black and white guide camera. I mean, if you're shooting something that has a faster sampling rate and is in black and white, in a smaller sensor, I imagine that would work really great as a guide camera too.
The first monochrome camera I bought for this was the ASI 174 mm. I still use it today. It's my go-to camera. It is like, it's just like the perfect ratio for solar imaging.
Brian?
Yes.
Jordan Kaniski here. I know that some people with the PSD joining imaging, the 2x is a bit much. But if you take a 2x Barlow and unscrew it and just take the bottom part, that's about 1.6.
Yeah.
And I've seen people use that.
That's how I've used mine. I'll put the camera snout, I'll put the 1.25 inch snout on the camera, and then screw that element into that.
Yeah. And I have a question about your mosaics. So you do your auto stack it, and then you do your mosaics right as in your next step, right?
Yep, exactly.
Have you ever tried just doing your auto stack it and then doing a batch processing of all of those stacked images and then making a mosaic? I mean, does that make a difference?
So I have. I run into trouble, especially like with a gradient, like what's shown here. So I found it's easier to process that gradient out of it after it's a full disk image versus trying to deal with the individual images. And PT GUI, it prefers like unedited as much as possible, because every time you start editing with it, Photoshop changes some of the detail. And I've really had better luck, just going right out of auto stacker and then right to PT GUI to stitch.
Okay, thanks.
Brian, Carol had a question in the chat. She wanted to know if you process the white light and the hydrogen alpha together for like kind of a combined image.
So I have. Let's see if I can find it. I think it was back up. So these two images here, I shot with the same telescope setup. Just the only difference was one was in hydrogen alpha and one was with white light filter. There's really not a good way to combine them because the level of detail is so much different. Like on these images here, it's really there's so much surface granulation. It looks like grains of sand, basically, which you can kind of see here in the white areas. Whereas this is more like strands and longer elements. So they don't really like combine well together. But this kind of shows the difference between the two. You can see the sunspot, like this particular sunspot looks almost identical in the center. But then you can see the outer edges look quite a bit different between hydrogen alpha and broadband.
But it looks like there's not very much information that the white light gives you that H alpha doesn't.
Yes and no. It's different detail. So like I said, the white light will show like surface granulation more. This white area is called plage. It shows that. And then, like I said, the hydrogen alpha is where the real detail's at. That's where you see, like the filaments and everything else going on. I mean, really, now that I've got good setups to do both, as long as we have sunspots to look at, white light is pretty interesting as well. When we don't have sunspots, then hydrogen alpha is really where all the detail is going to show up.
Now, some of your telescopes are, I'm not as informed about solar observing as some of the other people in the club, but I noticed that some of your telescopes seem to be set up specifically for these H alpha etalon filters, and other ones it seems like are existing scopes that you're finding creative ways to add the etalons to.
Yes.
If someone has, say, an 80 millimeter refractor, which is a common advanced beginner scope, how much of an investment would it be to add these etalons to get some decent H alpha pictures of the sun?
So my recommendation for starting out is really like a Daystar Quark.
Okay, to actually start with the dedicated instrument.
So, well, the Quark can be added to almost any refractor.
Okay.
So let me see if I can find one here. So here.
I thought the Quark was the all-in-one. Okay.
So this part right here is the Quark. Looks kind of like a big eyepiece.
Okay.
This can be added to virtually any refractor. I've mounted it. So I've got a 6-inch one. I put it on that. This is a 400 millimeter. I put it on that. It works on almost any refractor. They're about $1,300.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Like
so
I said, it's
imagining the actual etalons are a lot more.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you start going to like these here, so I have a SM. It's an SM370 is what it's called. It's a Coronado solar telescope. I basically took these off of. So that's a 400 millimeter telescope as well. So it was made to be modular, so you could remove these. At the time when these were sold, you could actually buy the etalons separately to attach to whatever type of telescope.
Okay.
You buy the etalons and the blocking filter. Of course, with the whole Meade, Coronado, all that's defunct now. So, but it's, I haven't looked at High Point to see if they're selling any of the Coronado stuff. It might be, if somebody's really interested in solar imaging, might be some really great deals on some of the Coronado stuff. So you might want to keep your eyes open for that.
With Coronado gone, are there any other manufacturers that make this, or are we looking at a drought?
Yep. So Lunt makes these. Lunt made the original tilt etalons for Coronado. So, and I've also checked into it since I do have a Coronado. There are places. So one of the big problems with the etalons off the Coronado is, so it's basically like two pieces of glass inside. They're held apart with like they're little tiny glass chips, and it's what's called wetted. So it's just the basic surface finish of it that's holding it all together, and they can become unwetted. So my Coronado I bought used, and that's one of the Edelons was that way. So I was fortunate enough to be able to send it back to Coronado, and it was like $150 to fix it. So it wasn't a big deal. But I've checked into it, and based on what I've read, there's like 2 other places that'll fix these Edelons. So I wouldn't be too concerned about buying one, just because there are other places that will fix them now. So like I said, I have a feeling there's going to be some Coronado scopes to come up for sale, because people are scared now that without Coronado around, there's nobody to fix them. But the reality is there's other places that'll fix them. So I'm not selling mine. So
Lunt still sells the individual Edelons.
So I think with Lunt you can get like the front mount Edelon, a little bit different than these, but yeah, I think you can still get those through Lunt as well.
So it sounds like a good investment for someone who knows they're going to be serious about this, or possibly something a club might buy if they thought enough members would use it.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's definitely so like I said, I do some outreach up at Wyalusing Park, and the last one I did, I had about 100 people there, and it always amazes me to hear reactions when people look through them, right? Because I mean, you're looking at the sun with a telescope, right? How often do you get to do that? And I mean, it's definitely something if you're interested at all in it. I'll post when I do those outreach programs up at Wyalusing again. I would definitely encourage you to stop in and take a look through it. Or if the Madison group would like to do something like this, I'd be happy to bring my equipment up and let everybody take a look through it. If there's enough interest in it, I'd be happy to do that.
That'd be real neat, because I know in the past, I mean, we do monthly star parties. We plan ahead and have them once a month, but it's been asked, hey, how about a daytime solar observing event? So yeah, that's something we'll have to keep in mind, because yeah, you'd be surprised at. I mean, my first telescope, when I first got in the hobby, I got a white light filter because there was a partial solar eclipse coming up, and it's just fascinating to see the sun and H alpha, and just tuning the view just to get the details you're looking for. It's just very fascinating and kind of a eye-opening experience, so to speak.
Like like what's here in the picture is so this is Lunt's modular telescope. So basically it's 100 millimeter APO refractor, and then these elements are attached to the back of it. So you can see all these thumb screws on here. So what I can actually do is take this whole assembly off, and then there's another focuser I can put on the back and use it as a nighttime telescope. Really, I think for the money, I mean, it's an expensive telescope. But I think for the money spent on it, giving its versatility, I think it'd be hard to beat. That being said, it's still an expensive piece of equipment, but it's to me, this is one of my primary hobbies. So to me, this thing is great. I love it.
Yeah, I think I got a white light filter for my 6-inch refractor, and one of the things I noticed when I got that white light filter is it was kind of a film-based filter, and there was a warning on there, be very careful not to damage this filter, because if you get like a pinhole, you don't happen to notice there's a pinhole in that filter, now it becomes a very dangerous thing to look through. And I think one of the advantages of having one of these nice H alpha filters is you always know it's safe to look through.
Yeah.
Do you have any comments on that, Brian?
So I would definitely agree with that. I'm fairly cautious about front mount filters, just for the fact like that they're easily damaged, and it can be almost imperceivable damage. And again, you are magnifying the sun, so you do have to exercise quite a bit of caution with it. Whereas these hydrogen alpha filters, with this blocking filter on the back of it, like I said, this blocks out all the UV and IR light. So all you really get into the camera then is hydrogen alpha or the eyepiece. This is you would generally put an eyepiece here where the camera's at. So it's like I said, it's safe. Like I said, I do this a lot. So this particular setup here, like I said, this is a Celestron C8. I made this off-axis plate for it. This was just kind of an experiment. I wanted to try it to see what it was going to look like. It worked amazingly well. 2,000 millimeter focal length. F10 works fine for this. Again, you're looking at the sun, so you get plenty of light. The only thing I was not all that happy about was the blocking filter. So these blocking filters come in different apertures basically, and this is kind of the middle one. So it's okay with like high resolution or high magnification like this, but like on lower magnification, you can kind of see the edge of the aperture in the images when you try to do like a full disk image. So that was the primary reason behind doing this was I want to use more of the sweet spot. So.
Have you done anything in any wavelengths other than H alpha? Have you done potassium or anything like that?
So I've got, I can get to it here. So I've got, there it is. So I've got an ultraviolet filter. It's like a 5 angstrom ultraviolet. It's made by Leah Filters. So I've got, so my white light, what I use for white light is a Bader solar wedge. And for that, I've got the solar continuum filter, the green one, which is really good for observing. Our eyes are pretty sensitive to green light, so it works out really well. You can see quite a bit of the granulation detail. And then I've also got this ultraviolet filter for that as well. So this image here I shot with my C8 with that Bader wedge on the back of it. When I showed some pictures of what I was shooting, there was a lot of concern about secondary etalon or the secondary mirror inside the C8 overheating, because there was no front filter on it. I was just pointing the C8 at the sun. I checked it regularly. Mine's got the what do they call it? Fast something. So you can pull the secondary mirror out of it. I pulled it out several times. It wasn't hot, so I just kept imaging this way. So I've used solar continuum, the ultraviolet, and then hydrogen alpha. Those are like the 3 that I've imaged in. I know Daystar has other filters like sodium and magnesium. I haven't really seen images out of it, so I don't really know what the difference in detail would be with those, or what the difference in features you could see. But I know the ultraviolet filter shows quite a bit more like the surface granulation than even like the green filter, the green solar continuum does. The problem with the ultraviolet filter that I noticed right away was like if there was any haze in the air at all, it was really a poor filter for that, probably just due to the short wavelength. Whereas with hydrogen alpha, I can it's shocking the clouds I can shoot through and still get a decent image with hydrogen alpha. Whereas any of the white light filters or the ultraviolet filter, you need really good seeing conditions to make it work.
Well, does anybody have any other questions for Brian?
Let me just make a quick comment that Brian, you had mentioned that you changed the colors on your prominences to be more red after last year's eclipse. And I just
Yes.
wanted to say that was one of the most striking things about watching that eclipse, was seeing not only that the hydrogen alpha is red to our eyes like it
Yep.
should be, but it's not even red. It's like hot
More of
pink
a,
even.
Yep, more of a magenta.
And I think I even said that out loud watching it. Oh my God, it's hot pink. Because, you know, the camera sensors, the last eclipse picked it up for me as being hot pink. And I thought, oh, that must be some weird artifact. It's not actually hot pink. It's, oh my God,
It
it's
is.
hot pink. And
Yep.
likewise, you had just said a minute ago, dovetailing in how effective that H alpha is at cutting through the clouds. We were somewhere where the cirrus clouds were so thick that I did not think we were going to see anything. I thought this whole thing was blown, and that I was setting up my equipment, but I didn't think I was going to get anything. And then, you know, I look at my pictures of those prominences and they're clear as day.
Yep. So I've got an IR filter that I can put in my beta wedge as well. I think what the problem is with it, IR, like a beta IR wedge or a beta IR filter is basically a visible light cut filter. So it doesn't like provide a narrow infrared wavelength, right? It's like a real broad infrared length. So the images I shot with it look almost kind of blurry. I think it's just because it's such a broad infrared range.
All right. Any other questions for Brian?